Hey everyone, it's Jamie Jo right here at Madlit Musings Popcast. It's a popcast today, everyone. Sorry, Madlit Musings podcast. And I have with me Janine Rosche. I pronounced that correctly, right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Very few people do. Good job.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Well, I have this thing where I try and, before I get on the podcast, verify with the author, even if it's like, Anne Brown. Is this how you say it? And then, of course, we were talking for a half hour already, and I forgot to ask. So
Yeah.
now you've been around in the book world for a while. You just haven't been on my podcast, and you do have a book that's come out the week of June 6th,
Mhm.
and it's coming out with Revell Publishing. But tell our readers a little bit about you, the books you've already released, and this book that's coming out.
Okay, so I had my first book release a little over 3 years ago. I just celebrated that anniversary. I have written four romances, contemporary romances that are inspirational and clean, if you're looking for that kind of a romance. And they are all set out west. I'm an Ohioan. I have found that not a lot of people want to read romances set in Ohio. I'm not sure why, but so the books I've already written are set out in Montana and Colorado, and yeah, they came out a couple years ago, and my books tend to be on a little bit on the heavier side.
Okay.
So they have romance in them, but they have a lot of deep issues. And so with this book, With Every Memory, I'm a little bit more on the women's fiction side of things than the romance side, but there still is a lot of romance in it. So yeah, With Every Memory comes out June 6th with Revell.
Awesome. And so you're kind of like that perfect conglomeration of romance and thought-provoking issues, is
Yes,
what
well,
I'm
that's what
hearing.
I try to be.
That's awesome. Okay, and so with every memory, you obviously said that people don't want to read romances and such in Ohio, which why? It's like a destination place, right? Um, but is where is with every moment set? Is that also set out west?
With Every Memory is
Sorry.
set in Colorado. I actually wrote it when I lived in just north of Denver, between
Okay.
like a little bit shy of Boulder, like
Mm-hmm.
right up against the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the perfect setting for this
Mm.
book because it does have a little bit of a suburban feel. That's what the characters are dealing with,
Okay.
is, when you're going through issues in life, and then you have suburbia all giving their opinions on it
Right.
as well. So this was the first book that I wrote that is set in that type of town instead of like
Okay.
a small mountain town.
Right.
And so it's set out there. There's a couple scenes that are very rustic in the mountains, but for the most part, it's a more domestic fiction,
Okay.
set in the home, set around the school, things like that.
Sure, sure. Okay. Well, I'm going to just read the back cover copy off your website, so that
Go
readers can
ahead.
hear what it is. It's called With Every Memory. I'm going to get that
Mhm.
title right. And is this the life she can't remember, one she'd rather forget? 1 year after her family was in a tragic car accident that killed her teenage son, Lori Mendenhall returns home with a traumatic brain injury that has stolen the last 8 years of memories from her. She is shocked to find that the life she was leading before the accident is unrecognizable. Her once loving husband, Michael, is a distant workaholic she isn't sure she can trust, and her once bubbly daughter, Avery, has spent the last year hidden away in her room. For Avery, life stopped when she lost her twin. Now, if she wants to graduate high school, she'll have to accept help from Xander Dixon, her brother's best friend and the boy who relentlessly teased her for years. And if Lori wants to reconnect with her husband, she'll have to grapple with information her brain is trying to keep secret. With every memory that returns, she can't help but wonder if the life she can't remember is one she'd rather forget. Wow,
Mhm.
that
It
sounds
makes it sound so
intriguing.
good, doesn't
It
it?
does. It sounds delicious. Aside from the car accident, which is rather tragic.
Yes, it is. But that happens off the page. for the
Okay.
most part.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
these
So,
flashbacks, but
yeah. So, little trigger warning on the loss of a child, but other
yes,
than that,
absolutely, absolutely. That is something I'm a big fan of sensitivity warnings at the
yes.
front of books, and there is definitely
Yeah.
one. If you have lost a child or have dealt with that, I would consider just be
Just
careful
proceed
of
cautiously.
with
Yeah.
this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I'm assuming that's probably really woven throughout the story is also that struggle with grief and reconciliation.
Oh yeah, yeah. And really Austin, who was the child who died, they were, let me see, I think they were 17 when the
Okay.
accident happened, he and his twin sister. And he was the glue to the family.
Mm,
You know, we all have that person in our
yep.
family. They're the ones that, you know, for our family, it's my son Braden, who's 15.
Hmm.
And if everyone is in a bad mood and they're fighting and no one's in a good mood, he's the one that will come in and say the joke, or he will try to, like, you know, mediate something.
Right.
He's
Right.
kind of the glue in our family. And that is what Austin was to this family.
Mm,
And once he's gone, you have these three other people, Lori, Michael, and Avery, who really don't know how to exist
yeah.
without him keeping their family together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it does have that the mourning aspect for sure. But a lot of it is focused on those relationships that are left and
Right.
how to keep those going.
Yeah. How to preserve those relationships after tragedy, which is not an uncommon struggle, really. When you think of tragedy as it strikes, then there's a whole
Mhm.
element of different ways of dealing with grief and tension and life change.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
That was something that really, I wrote this, I think, a year after I lost my dad,
Mm,
and I come from a big family,
hmm.
and I think every single one of us dealt with it differently.
Yeah.
And, you know, for some, it pulls you towards other people. For some, it pushes you away.
Hmm.
Some people, you know, stuff it down and try not to deal with it. Other people want to deal with it right out there in the open.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of that. You know, you
Yeah.
have Michael, who's this well meaning husband who can't deal with the loss. And so he
Mm,
pours all of his time into his job and his work and his clients, which doesn't go well when you're in a family environment and people are relying on you.
right.
So causes a lot of issues. Yeah, and then it makes Avery regret so much what the last thing she said to her brother and the
Mm,
way that she treated him before he passed away. And you know, there it's just a lot. Each of
yeah.
these characters is carrying a lot with them.
Right. Right. And grief is so difficult to reconcile too, because I noticed when my mom passed away, the differences between how various people in my family addressed the grief. And it wasn't even just how they addressed it, but at the speed at which it was addressed too.
Mhm.
I found that, I was telling somebody the other day, I'm going on year two, and I feel like year two is harder than the first year. And then I was talking to another family member, and they were like, well, it's been 2 years. Like, and they didn't mean it insensitively. It's like to them, it's like, hey, we've gone through it. She's in a better place. We've healed. She'd want us to move on. Let's go live life. And I'm going,
Yeah,
it's been 2 years. And they're going, it's 2 years. And it's
yeah,
just interesting how that it's not right or wrong. It's just different from person to person.
exactly, exactly. I the last podcast that I recorded was with a woman who's also a grief counselor. And
Mm.
I was like, this family needs grief counseling so bad. Like, I am such a proponent of any
Oh
kind of
yeah.
therapy
Yeah.
or counseling
Mm-hmm.
in any sense, but especially when once you've lost someone,
Mm-hmm.
it is absolutely essential. And
Oh
this
yeah.
family is the perfect example of why that must exist, because it would have been great. Now, I will say that this seems like a really heavy story,
Mm-hmm.
and that is why I added in the teenage love interest,
I like that.
because Xander makes everything better. And it's so funny because he's like an 18-year-old kid, right? So it's a little creepy, but it's so funny. And the reviews I've been getting back, everybody's like, I love him. And I'm like, of course
Oh.
you do, because he is the guy that I imagined when I was in high school who would have made life completely better. Like
He's like the
exactly.
perfect high school boyfriend.
He is the perfect high school boyfriend. And in fact, my editor had to say to me, we need to make him a little less perfect.
So did
He's
you give him
still
a
an
little bit of acne on
18-year-old
his
boy.
forehead or something?
Yes.
Well, I'm not
Yeah.
changing his personality, so here, have a zit.
Yeah. Like I had one scene where like something bad happens to Avery, and instead of him having the perfect answer, I
Yeah.
literally have him just go, I don't know what to say. That's his one imperfection. But he's funny and he has a sense of comic relief. And
Yeah.
so it is a heavy book. I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not detracting from that at all.
Right.
There
Right.
is some slight moments.
Hmm.
Um, and it's so funny. Avery, the teenage girl, is so snotty sometimes and so funny that
Hmm.
we had to take away some of her imperfections because there was one point, oh my goodness, it is still one of my favorite moments I've ever written, but I had to take it out of the book
Oh
and I'm gonna share
no.
it with you now.
Okay.
So this big thing happens and
Okay.
it kind of revolves around a dream that one of her parents had,
Okay.
and it causes a big argument. And at one point, Avery says she's really mad at her parents, both of them, and it's it's one of those moments. It's kind of a make or break moment for the family. And she says, "I had a dream that I was having a baby with Michael B. Jordan, but I didn't wake up and go buy maternity clothes, did I?" And I thought it was the perfect teenage
Oh, it
girl.
is.
And my editor was like, it's kind of a serious moment. I don't know if your readers would appreciate the joke in there. And I'm like, okay,
I
well,
would. I
okay.
would.
So we left the serious moment in there. But I'm thinking, if I was when
Oh,
I was a
100%.
teenage girl,
Hmm.
I totally would have made inappropriate jokes in the hardest moments of my life.
I still do, unfortunately. People don't even want to go to funerals with me. I was cracking them at my mom's funeral, and people were looking at me as though I was just completely shocking. And I'm like, well, it's this or uncontrollable weeping. Which would you prefer?
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Funeral giggles are
Yes.
about the worst thing.
Yes. Oh,
That
okay. I'll expose myself in full vulnerability to the entire audience and you. I've never told this story publicly, but I have to because this is the perfect setting. I told my friend before my mom's funeral, I almost feel as though I just need to have some, you know, Jack Morgan or Captain Jack or whatever they call it, the rum. I just need to have a bottle of rum for my mom's funeral so I can get through this. I'm joking, right? So we go through the receiving room. I'm standing there and she comes up and my friend gives me one of my best friends. She just gives me this big warm hug and I kind of feel her, just doing the little pat down that friends do, which is, platonic and fine. She walks away and then I have to go give the eulogy. So I'm up in front of probably about 300 and some people, and I had written a letter to my mom. So I'm like, it's going to be rough. I get up to read the letter and get about halfway through, and I start getting choked up. And I'm like, I can't choke up. I reach into my pocket to get the Kleenex that I had stuffed there. I go to pull it out, and I feel something coming with it. And I'm in front of all these people reading a letter, feeling my pocket in my dress, and there is a bottle, a travel-sized bottle of Captain Morgan rum. And I discover it while I'm giving my mom's eulogy, and I snort. And everybody thinks I'm like collecting my tears, and I have gone from wanting to weep to hysterical laughter wanting to come out because I'm like, I literally pulled the Kleenex and this bottle of rum almost went flying across the stage. And I'm like,
gosh.
that would have made me look like a complete alcoholic at my mom's
Yeah, they would
funeral.
have set up an intervention for
Oh my
you
goodness. Yes.
immediately.
Yes. It was so funny. My friend Tracy, she knew everything that was going on. I am outing her here too. And she was in the audience and she's like busting up laughing. And this is my mom's funeral. And my husband
Yeah.
afterwards was like, what was going on? He's like, I couldn't tell if you were going to cry or laugh. And I'm like, oh man, I said I was going to laugh. And then all of a sudden I got a vision of my mom seeing the whole thing happen and her little mischievous snicker. And it just turned the funeral into a complete joy. It was so weird, but funny.
Yeah. Well, and to add to that, when you first started saying the Captain Jack Morgan, whatever, I
Yeah.
totally pictured Johnny Depp as
Yes,
Captain Jack Sparrow.
I
And I
know.
was like, wow, she needed Captain Jack Sparrow with her.
Who doesn't?
So the whole time that you're telling this story, all I can picture is you standing up, giving a eulogy with Johnny Depp in
Johnny
character,
Depp in my
standing next to you.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Well, I know I'm sitting here talking, I'm like, I don't know what's the rum called. Is it Captain Jack or is that a different thing? Is that whiskey? I don't know. I think it's Captain Morgan, but whatever, doesn't matter. It was in my pocket and it almost came flying across the stage at my mom's funeral. That was really funny. So now that we've completely made light of funerals and grief in a completely different way that we never expected.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it sounds like back to your book, it sounds like your lead character, the mother, Lori, has okay, her traumatic brain injury is not associated with her son's accident, correct?
It happened in the accident.
It
So
did.
she almost died in the
Okay.
accident. And so she is just now coming back home. It's
Okay.
been about 11 months, and she's now coming home, and she's kind of an unreliable narrator where she thinks she remembers things about her family, but she's remembering things about her family from 8 years before, not the
Okay.
way that things were leading up to the accident. And
Okay.
so she is she's going through like this new period of mourning, where she's having to get to know who her son was, who her daughter has become, who
Mm-hmm.
her husband has become, because what she remembers is her husband was this adoring, romantic,
Mm,
very, attentive husband who was like the high school accounting teacher. And
okay.
now he's a rich, sophisticated, wealth management firm
Mm, mm-hmm.
owner who works 18 hours a day and is
Yeah.
distant and has a very attractive woman working for him. And she's like, what is my life? She went from living in this, like we were talking earlier
Yeah.
before the podcast, living in this tiny little cottage,
Yep.
very small, bursting at the seams, but it's your home and you love it.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's in this gorgeous, newly built home in the mountains that has no personality. Like
Mm,
it's just a completely different life for her. And throughout the book, she's getting her memories back and learning a little bit about who even she had become
mm-hmm.
leading up to the accident. She had
Mm-hmm.
always been this wonderful mother, wife, friend, happy to stay home, happy to give her entire being to
Yeah.
the people around her. And now she's realizing that maybe she wasn't as those gifts weren't as appreciated as she wanted them to be.
Right.
You can totally see me and some of the struggles that I've dealt with in
Yeah.
Lori. I wrote this book at a time when I had just gone back to work after being a stay-at-home mom for 10 years and going through that transition of for 10 years, my entire purpose was to make sure that my family was happy and
Yeah.
healthy and
Yeah.
and now I was thinking, okay, well, is it time for my dreams yet? When
Mm-hmm.
do I get to start doing the things that I feel called to do that
Right.
may or may not involve my family?
Yeah.
And so that is what Lori is starting to figure out is if she's now getting a second chance to
Mm-hmm.
become Lori Mendenhall,
Yeah.
is she going to take the same path that she had taken,
Mm.
in the 8 years prior or not? So it was,
Yeah.
and then of course that all has that all has, consequences.
Right.
When you make a decision for yourself and you're in a family, it's going to affect other people. And that's kind of
Hmm.
what you see in this story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of an interesting parallel because you think about the grief journey again, and you do become a different person after that.
Hmm.
And then you throw in lost memories and things. And I think that's an interesting parallel to really show that stark before and after
Yes. Yeah.
situation, and how faith works into that, and hope. So
Hmm.
that's cool. So speaking of faith and hope, I'm assuming there's an element of faith and hope in your book.
Yes, there is. It is not as faith forward
Hmm.
as some of my books in the past.
Okay.
This is more a couple of characters who have had various forms of involvement in their,
Hmm.
Lori and Austin were avid churchgoers,
Okay.
and that was a very big thing. Avery and Michael went because their family wanted them to go.
Right.
And you start seeing how each of those changes a little bit. Lori is now looking at her life and going, what was all my faithfulness worth?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And then you have Avery, who's just now actually giving her faith the time of day
Sure.
and considering that. And then, of course, there's the whole aspect of having hope when everything else in your life seems to be falling apart, still being able to find that hope to carry on that one more day,
Hmm.
just believing that things will get better, believing that, you have people around you who care about you,
Yeah.
you have God who cares about you. And so you get to see that. Again, it's not as um, forward and
Hmm.
upfront as it
Hmm.
has been in some of my other stories, but it's there.
Well, and sometimes that quiet journey is even more effective because it's relatable.
Mhm,
Because I don't know that I've lived a life where my faith is a part of it, but I mean it the answers don't necessarily come forward very
mhm,
easily. It's that quiet journey and that walk where as you struggle through things that is very relatable in fiction
mhm.
like this. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I do think that a lot of times, people who have been living a life of faith,
Yeah.
sometimes we don't get to see characters that look like ourselves going through struggles,
Mhm.
we see the people who, maybe have yet to give their life to Christ. Like
Right.
we get to see them go through that journey. But,
Mhm.
I became a Christian when I was, I think, 16,
Okay.
and I hadn't been through anything
Right.
before
Right.
before I
No
was
joke.
16.
No
Oh my
joke.
goodness. So, yes, I think there needs to be a lot more stories written towards people like me who, we have the faith, we go to the church and we're going,
Mhm.
what is going on in life?
Yeah. Yeah, this
But
is
this
not what I was banking on.
yes, yes. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, this is great. I'm really excited about this book. I'm excited about another great story that's going to challenge people in their faith, but also hopefully encourage them too, which I think is
Mhm.
well needed during these times. So, how do readers find out more about you and about your past books that have come out as well?
Well, you can always go to my website, JanineRosche.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. I am on TikTok, but I don't like being on TikTok. And you can tell when you go there and you see I've posted like 5 videos and that's,
Oh, well, hey, you might be a little bit ahead of me then.
but yeah, that is my goal, is to start, that's what we hear all the time as authors. You got to be on TikTok.
I
And
know.
yeah, for somebody who is not good at dancing,
I know. I feel like you have to have
TikTok
a
doesn't
dance
seem
degree
like
or dance
a
certification or whatever it is.
yes, yes. Oh goodness. So yeah, but you can find me on pretty much all the
Okay.
social media angles. This is a topic where I've dealt with struggling marriages in
Mm,
my books in the past. And that's something I've gotten a lot of emails about,
okay.
just because it is a very tender subject. And this
Yeah.
book is no different. It's a tough subject to
Yeah.
deal with. And
Yeah.
so I'm always open to receiving emails from people who are going through something similar. Yeah, I'm always happy to connect with my fans and my readers.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And just as a reminder to readers who are listening or watching, that the book you want to go get right now is called With Every Memory by Janine Rosche, and it's published by Revell Publishing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.